During the next presentation, may I request your absolute silence?
Well, I thought my razor was dull until I heard his speech. And that reminds me of a story that's so dirty I'm ashamed to think of it myself.
For I have a message of great importance for everyone in the audience.
I implore you, send him back to his father and brothers, who are waiting for him with open arms in the penitentiary. I suggest that we give him 10 years in Leavenworth or 11 years in Twelveworth.
I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll take 5 and 10 in Woolworth.
Now remember, please, absolute quiet.
Cut the cards.
Absolute quiet.
Los hermanos Marx, Groucho, Chico y Harpo fueron las principales estrellas cómicas de su tiempo. Irreverentes, impredecibles y contracorriente, llenaron los Estados Unidos de risas en la época de la Depresión. Y sorprendentemente, su humor tiene tanta influencia hoy como cuando hicieron sus películas clásicas. Esos son los hermanos Marx que conocemos y amamos, pero su historia es mucho más. Los irreverentes hermanos Marx.
The Marx Brothers are retiring from the silver screen.
That's right, folks. We're on our way. That's all right, folks. Well, where do we go from here?
Puede que Groucho, Chico y Harpo hubiesen precipitado el final de su carrera, pero lo cierto era que los hermanos habían perdido el entusiasmo por el mundo del cine, de modo que en 1941 se retiraron. No era la primera vez que sus carreras habían llegado a un punto muerto, pero como solo 5 años después del importante éxito de Una noche en la ópera y Un día en las carreras. ¿Cómo habían llegado a esto? Todo comenzó en la Alemania del siglo XIX, donde sus abuelos maternos dirigían una compañía ambulante de teatro. Levi Schoenberg era un mal mago, Fanny era una arpista tirolesa. Cuando llegaron a los Estados Unidos, su hija Minnie tenía 15 años. 7 años más tarde, la brillante, competente y ambiciosa Minnie se casaba con Sam Marx. Frenchy, como le llamaba todo el mundo, era, a decir de la mayoría, un hombre muy agradable, un gran cocinero, pero como sastre muy malo. Frenchy y Minnie criaron a 5 chicos, pero lo que pocos saben es que hubo un sexto hermano Marx.
Chico was born after the firstborn died, and his name was Manfred. Because Chico came after that, Minnie was very attached and adored him.
Leonard nació en 1887. De niño, Chico aprendió a hacer dinero en salas de apuestas, pistas de carreras y bares.
1/4 scotch, 1/4 rye. Okay, lady, I sent him right over.
Chico caused trouble from the time he was quite young. I mean, he got into gambling. He was a compulsive gambler by the time he was 12.
Una vez, cuando iba a entregar un traje de parte de su padre, perdió una apuesta y los pantalones con un estafador local, de modo que robó las tijeras de Frenchy y las empeñó para recuperar los pantalones. Su personaje en la escena, el adorable artista del timo, ya iba tomando forma.
It is very likely because whatever love Minnie was able to give was so directed at Chico that Chico was probably felt the most secure in himself because he's the one who wheeled and dealed jobs for them. And though probably he never cracked open a book, he was very articulate and delightful.
She used to give him, 50 cents a week to get piano lessons, and maybe he got to the piano teacher once out of 4 times because he'd gamble the 50 cents away on the way to the teacher.
Nobody ever had played the piano like him before, and nobody's ever played it like him since. It's quite an unusual technique that he developed all by himself. You know, he worked very hard at it, but only when he had to. The only time he ever practiced at all was when he had a show to do. He left us this remarkable legacy of how he played the piano, and people probably remember him more for his piano playing than anything else.
En 1888 nacía Adolf. A la sombra de la sociabilidad de chico, este muchacho, que después se cambiaría el nombre por Arthur y finalmente por Harpo, se convirtió en el hijo bueno.
Every day he would come home from school, he'd go by the window and he'd see the man rolling the cigars. And as he rolled the cigars, he made this remarkably hideous-looking face. He couldn't help it. It was just a reaction. The man would go, and the cigar would be made. And Dad thought that was one of the best-looking men he had ever seen in his life. He developed the gookie. As a result, it became a part of his act.
Una vez perfeccionado el gesto, Harpo golpeó la ventana, hizo la mueca y enfureció al hombre de los cigarros. Así que el comienzo de Harpo desafiando a las figuras autoritarias no es totalmente inocente.
Hey, you're a wide guy, ain't you? Let go of that club. Give me that club here. Did you see that badge?
He taught himself how to play the harp. Having no resources to go out and get lessons, he learned on the job as playing accompaniment for the brothers. And they incorporated the harp into the act.
Daddy was a great ragtime pianist, and he had fun at the piano, but Harpo was a really great musician, extraordinary harpist.
En 1890 se completó el famoso trío cuando nació Julius. Tranquilo e intelectualmente curioso, acostumbraba a encerrarse en el baño para leer, almacenando el arsenal verbal que le caracterizaría.
Not that I care, but where is your husband?
Why, he's dead.
I'll bet he's just using that as an excuse.
I was with him till the very end.
No wonder he passed away.
I held him in my arms and kissed him.
Oh, I see. Then it was murder. Will you marry me? Did he leave you any money? Answer the second question first.
Incluso de niño, Julius era cuidadoso con el dinero. Minnie le daba 5 centavos para comprar pan. Él compraba una barra del día anterior por 4 centavos y se quedaba el resto. Groucho siempre asoció dinero con seguridad. Los 3 hermanos Mars pasaron a ser 4 en 1892, cuando nació Milton, y 5 en 1901, cuando Herbert se convirtió en el 5º hermano Mars. Los hijos de Minnie se criaron en un barrio de inmigrantes pobres de la zona este de Nueva York de principios de siglo.
Minnie's determination to see her son succeed was possibly reflective of feeling a failure in her own life and feeling that these boys had it.
Guiados por su madre, hicieron cualquier cosa por huir de la pobreza. Esa voluntad de hacer de todo les capacitó para sobrevivir a los horrores del vodevil de poca monta.
The boys were doing so badly in school, except for Groucho, they were all playing hooky, that she decided to put them all into show business so they'd be in one place where she could keep an eye on them.
Comenzaron haciendo un número musical familiar. Primero fueron los 3 y después los 4 ruiseñores. Este es Groucho, aunque parezca Harpo con la sonrisa desdentada. Años después, Groucho recordaba una de sus primeras actuaciones.
And I walked out on the stage and there were 60 musicians sitting out front dressed in evening clothes. I'd never seen anybody dressed in evening clothes except my father when he got married. But here were Here were these 60 men, and I was stiff with fright. But I bellowed this song out. I was young enough to have courage in those days. Anyhow, this is the way the chorus went. Of course, you must remember that I could sing then. Somebody, sweetheart, I want to be. Somebody's heart beating all for me. Somebody's 2 arms around me. When I feel blue, somebody's sweetheart, and that means you. That was it.
Daddy told me that the first time Harpo went on stage, he was so terrified he wet his pants. on stage. Poor little boy. He was very sweet. I loved Harpo.
Para los hermanos Marx, en el vodevil no hubo glamour. Recorrieron el país cantando en teatros perdidos con la única compañía de sus sueños, lejanos e idealistas, para mantenerlos en la brecha.
The face boy would sing, way down by the sad seaside, and then Gummer would sing, sat two lovers side by side, and Harpo would sing, first he sighed, and then she sighed, and then I'd sing, and then they both sighed side by side, and then we'd sing, Peasy Weezy, what's his name? Peasy Weezy, what's his name?
Chico was in the same town that his brothers were in. And when he saw that they were playing, he bribed the guy in the pit who played the piano to let him stand in for him. And when his brothers saw him in the pit, they started throwing things at him, and he threw them back, and he joined the act.
En 1910 tuvo lugar un avance importante para los hermanos, y sobre todo en Nagadoches, Texas.
They would do a show and get on a train and move to the next town and do another show.
What happened is, as they were in the middle of their song, and not a very good song at that, a man runs in and says, "Runaway mule, runaway mule." And the audience raced out to see a runaway mule. So Groucho was just furious. When the audience finally filed back in, he made comments like Nagadoches
is full of roaches. I think that was the kind of thing that they were saying. But the people thought it was funny.
And then apparently Dad decided on the spur of the moment to dive under a rug that was on the stage and go across the stage under the rug. And Chico ran over and started shooting the piano keys, and they became a comedy act as a result of this.
El número acabó siendo una obra llamada Humor en la escuela. Los hermanos provocaban el caos en cada ciudad en la que actuaban, subiendo y bajando por los pasillos, improvisando alocadamente y destruyendo prácticamente el teatro.
Elderly man came up to see me. He must have been in his 90s, and he said, "I just want you to know that the Marx Brothers were the greatest. And I know because I was there. I saw them in vaudeville." And I said, "Well, thank you." There were guys that came out of that era that were just fabulous, like Jack Benny and W.C. Fields. And the man said to me, "They were all a breath of fresh air. But the Marx Brothers, they were a hurricane."
Now listen, you're making a big mistake. These fellas are very clever. They're funny fellas. And I've got a play that I've written that I'd like to explain to you. I'd like to read this manuscript for you. It's a wonderful play, and these fellas would fit in it. Now, if you just come over and sit down with me for a minute, I'll explain the whole thing to you.
En Humor en la escuela, Groucho interpretaba a un severo profesor, papel que encarnaría 20 años después en Plumas de caballo.
Now then, baboons, what is a corpuscle? That's easy. First as a captain, then as a lieutenant, then as a corpuscle. That's fine. Why don't you bore a hole in yourself and let the sap run out?
Los hermanos eran una fuerza desatada sobre el escenario, pero fue un acto de desesperación de Minnie lo que les dio el empuje que necesitaban. En 1914 tuvo la valentía de comprar una página de publicidad entera en la revista Variety. En ella garantizaba descaradamente que los hermanos Marx reventarían la taquilla o trabajarían gratis. Resultó, y de ahí en adelante consiguieron contratos en firme en los grandes circuitos del vodevil.
She took the name of Minnie Palmer and she became an agent. And when Daddy joined the act, one of the things he discovered was that in order to sell some of her acts, she'd sell the Marx Brothers cheaper. So he, very gently, because he adored Minnie, but he managed to get the reins away and become the manager. And he stayed their manager until the very end.
I'm sincerely proud to greet you and thank you very much for coming here. Chico, I've been a fan of yours, may I say this, since I was about this high when I saw you in Duck Soup. Are you really brothers?
Well, as far as I know. You know, a lot of people ask me, are we really brothers, and can Harpo talk, and how'd you get your name? Is he going to make any more pictures? You know, Harpo can really talk. If you don't think he can talk, just play golf with him and let him miss a putt that big. You'll hear him talk. How we got our names is a very interesting thing.
One night, the Marx Brothers were involved in a backstage game of stud poker, and a comedian named Art Fisher was dealing. And he dealt a card to Leonard, and he stopped and he said, "Wait a moment, you're always chasing the chicks. So we're going to call you Chico.
Chico's name came because in those days, a fellow who chased girls was called a chicken chaser.
I got my name when I was about 15 years of age. I used to chase the chickens. I still chase them, but I don't catch them anymore. And I'm just waiting for a rainy day. I'm good in the mud.
And a 6, he put down for Julius, who he decided to call Groucho.
We used to wear a little bag goes around the neck, was called a grouch bag. In this bag, we would keep our pennies, our marbles, piece of candy, little marijuana, whatever we could pick up. Well, we were studying to be musicians. And Groucho got his name from the bag.
You wore a little grouch bag around your neck with some money in it, and you never took it off. When you slept, and you never took it off. And that was maybe part of the name Groucho.
And I got my name from that cartoon strip.
My own theory was that he really was going by his disposition. That's mean. He wasn't always grouchy, but he was grouchy a lot.
Well, Harpo got his name because, obviously, he played the harp.
When they were on the farm, Zeppo, who was about 14, was sitting on a fence when Daddy was walking down the road. And when he saw Daddy, he went, "Hi there, Zeke." And Dad said, "Hi there, Zepp." And it stuck.
And Zeppo was born when the first Zeppelin came over to America. That's how he got his name.
There was a freak, apparently, with Ringling Brothers Circus, and the freak's name was Zippo. For some strange reason, the brothers decided to call him Zippo, and he hated that. His name was Herbert, but he had only that choice other than Zippo, so he changed it to Zeppo.
And Gummo wore thick-soled shoes, gum shoes, and they called him Gummo because of the shoes, because you could never hear him coming.
Pasarían otros 10 años antes de que sus apodos fuesen conocidos por el público, pero como quiera que se les llamase, los hermanos Marx llegaron por fin a la cumbre. En 1915 actuaban en el primer teatro de vodevil de los Estados Unidos, el Palace. El público de Nueva York quedó prendado, y de repente los hermanos Marx se vieron ganando más de $1.500 a la semana. Aunque Groucho era el actor principal, era Harpo, según la revista Variety, quien más destacaba. Variety afirmaba, es un cómico que toca el arpa, no habla y arranca grandes sonrisas por su dominio de ambas cosas.
What do you think you are? Hey, wait a minute. You know who this is? No. He sells frankfurters at the Mudgeon Wieners.
Well, what do you want? My name is What Do You Care? My home is anywhere. People say I'm awful dumb, so I thought to you I'd come. Say, listen, what is it?
Now, just a moment. Wait a minute. He might be crazy. Wait, I'll find out. You want to go on the stage? Crazy.
At one time in their vaudeville act, Harpo did speak. But their act, along with his speaking, was wearing real thin, and they were having trouble getting work. And finally, one day in Chicago, Minnie convinced a theater owner to book her boys with the promise that they'd have a brand new act. So Minnie got her brother, Al Sheehan, who was one of that famous vaudeville duo, Gallagher and Sheehan, and that was their uncle, to write the script for them that night. Unfortunately, in his haste, he forgot to write any lines in for my dad, who said, "Okay, I'll just ad-lib." Well, they went ahead and they did the show, and then the following day the reviews came out and said something like, last night's bill at the Orpheum, Arthur Marx proved himself a first-rate pantomimist. However, his reputation as a comedian was rudely shattered every time he opened his mouth to speak. And from that time on, he never spoke another word on stage, just used the horn and the whistle.
You know, I'd be lost without a telephone.
I was on the road with him. My Uncle Harpo once took me piggyback across the stage, and I must say I did love the applause.
Los Estados Unidos entraron en la Primera Guerra Mundial en abril de 1917. Los jóvenes eran obligados a alistarse, pero Minnie estaba decidida a mantener el grupo completo.
During this First World War, Grandma read where farmers didn't have to go to war, so she bought a farm.
So they went out and they bought 2,000 chickens. Problem was, there were rats on the farm, and so the rats ate the eggs every morning. When their friends would come to visit to avoid the embarrassment, the Marx Brothers would go into town, buy several dozen eggs, and put them underneath the chickens. Of course, they realized that being farmers didn't work, and so they decided to at least try to enlist. Most of them got deferments because of eyesight or other medical conditions. Allegedly, Gummo was the only healthy one. Maybe only a coincidence that he was the most expendable to the act. Therefore, they decided to offer him up to service.
Después de que Gummo se alistase, los hermanos Marx vendieron la granja de gallinas y regresaron a los escenarios. Gummo no volvió a actuar más y acabó por convertirse en el representante de Groucho y Harpo. Su hermano pequeño, Herbert, ocupó su lugar en el número. Se había relacionado con algunos gángsteres y posiblemente su entrada en el mundo del espectáculo le evitase acabar en prisión.
For money, I'll do anything. Why don't you try me? You might as well.
You might be great.
Who can tell?
What do you call your specialty?
You mean my big sensation? I knock 'em cold when I pull off my Chevalier imitation.
You know, Zeppo took over for Groucho. He was his understudy when Groucho got sick. And many people who had seen Zeppo work felt that Zeppo was equal to the task. Zeppo was a very funny man.
Ansiosos de probar que podían ser divertidos fuera del vodevil, los hermanos emprendieron una ambiciosa marcha. Fue un desastre. Fracasaron estrepitosamente con un musical, financiaron su propia película muda, que era tan mala que nunca se estrenó, y su comedia estilo americano resultó ser un rotundo fracaso en 1922, durante una gira por Inglaterra. Cuando regresaron a casa, descubrieron que estaban en la lista negra por incumplimiento de contrato. Lo relegaron. Al único momento positivo de su carrera durante este periodo, le siguió el nacimiento del hijo de Groucho, Arthur.
The Marx Brothers were performing at Keith's Riverside Theater at the time, and Groucho spent a little too much time at the hospital visiting his wife and his newborn baby. And so he got back to the theater a little bit late.
And our curtain music was just playing as we walked in the theater. So I didn't have time to paste this on, so I took some black grease paint and I went like this.
And smeared on a grease paint mustache and eyebrows.
El éxito de la brillantina no podía negar el hecho de que los hermanos no tenían agente, ni patrocinadores, ni espectáculo. Sin embargo, uno por uno fueron fundando sus familias.
They passed the theater and the Marx Brothers were playing, and her girlfriend said, "Gee, I know a lot of actors." And Mother said, "Well, I know one of the Marx Brothers." So she said, "Prove it." So Mother sent a note backstage to Chico, and then they waited around outside the stage door, and Harpo came out and he said, "Hi, I'm Chico," and she said, "No, you're not." And Grouch came out and said, "Hi, I'm Chico," and she said, "No, you're not." And when Chico came out, he said, "You're the little girl who stood me up in Pittsburgh." And they started going together, and he told her to throw away her books, that she'd learn more from him than she ever would by going to school.
My father was always vying with Chico to be his mother's favorite, and he wasn't ever. Chico was the favorite. So my father turned around when Chico got married and married the first available woman, and that happened to be another dancer in the act. Chico's wife was a dancer, and that's how they got married. And they really weren't meant for each other, I don't think, from the start. They, in my opinion, never should have been married to begin with, but if they hadn't, then I wouldn't be here. So I guess I'm glad they got married.
Chico was always the Navy one. He says, "Look, we're better than half the shows that are on Broadway." And Harpo and I were always scared. We didn't think that we could make it.
He was enormously optimistic about everything. That was the gambler in him. And Groucho was always pessimistic. So that when Chico came up with the idea of doing a Broadway show, Groucho was terrified. He said, "Why should anybody go see us on Broadway for $3.30 when for 55 cents they can see us in vaudeville?" And Chico said, "Because we're too good for vaudeville." He said, "We belong on Broadway."
Un dibujante amigo de Chico tuvo una idea para una nueva producción en la que utilizarían unos decorados almacenados cerca de un teatro disponible en Filadelfia. Juntos, él y Chico combinaron los números ya existentes de los hermanos Marx con nuevo material, haciéndolo más una revista que un musical tradicional. Y tanto que lo es, se estrenó en Filadelfia en junio de 1923 y fue un éxito inmediato. Estuvieron en el Philly con el No hay entradas colgado durante 13 semanas antes de llevar el espectáculo de gira durante casi un año. Llegaron a Broadway en mayo de 1924. El sueño de Minnie estaba a punto de hacerse realidad.
It was opening night of I'll Say She Is. I was too little to go, and Minnie was being fitted for a dress for the opening night. She was standing on a little stool, and she fell off the stool.
And, you know, the old show business story, you know, break a leg. Well, Minnie did.
Everybody was hysterical and crying, and Minnie just went to the opening on crutches. She was indomitable.
Pero tal vez para los hermanos Mars la mayor emoción del día fuese la asistencia al estreno de gran parte de los críticos. Encantaron a todo el mundo sin excepción, pero especialmente prendado quedó el influyente crítico teatral Alexander Woollcott, quien de camino al teatro había dicho sarcásticamente que se dirigía a ver un grupo de acróbatas. La crítica de Woollcott fue uno de los momentos de más orgullo de Harpo y desencadenó una amistad de por vida entre ellos.
When they opened in their first show and Woollcott came to see them, the programs said Leonard Marks, Arthur Marks, Julius Marks, Herbert Marks, and when he was backstage, when he was being introduced to them, he heard, you know, Daddy say, "Hey, Grouch, you want to go out for anything?" And somebody said, "I don't know, Zepp, what are you doing?" And Woollcott said, "Excuse me, what are you calling each other?" And they said, "Well, those are our nicknames." He said, "You have those nicknames and you're using, you know, Herbert and Julius?" He said, "That's ridiculous." They said, "But it's not dignified." At which point, Woollcott fell on the floor laughing. But that's who changed, that's when they began to use their nicknames.
What do you think? I need a drink.
La única prueba que queda de su debut en Broadway es una película promocional de 1931 en la que los hermanos recreaban la escena inicial, demostrando la interacción verbal que conmocionó al público de Nueva York.
I want to speak to Mr. Lee. I'm a dramatic actor.
So I see. I'm Mr. Lee.
Well, lend an ear to me.
Can you play a role?
Can I play a role? Do you know who you're looking at?
No.
Caesar's ghost. I play any kind of a role.
You will?
I'll eat it up like that. I played a part in Ben-Hur once.
What part did you play, sir?
A girl. She played the part of Ben.
And you?
I played her.
When you go out, take a slam at the door.
You're kidding me, aren't you not?
Kidding, you say. I've been here all day. Now show me what you've got.
I wanted to play a dramatic part, the kind that touches a woman's heart, to make her cry, for me to die.
Did you ever get hit with a coconut pie?
There's my argument. Restrict immigration. I think I'll recite.
Let her go, all right.
Well, our first Broadway play was called I'll Say She Is. That was a current expression at that time. You know, you'd say a girl would walk down the street and you'd say, "Boy, she's good looking." And the fellow would say, "I'll say she is."
Well, what do you think?
Get me a brick.
Here's a brick. I always carry one for this invitation.
Hey, I don't know. Lay this on your head.
You can't do that. You don't belong to the Bricklayers Union.
Ahora, los hermanos Mars eran aclamados en Broadway. Los citaban en los artículos de los periódicos, los invitaban a fiestas, salían por la radio y les ofrecían ser miembros de clubes privados. Un día, según se dijo, Harpo estaba visitando a uno de sus nuevos amigos en el plató de una película muda y sucedió algo extraño. Acabó en película. Estas secuencias recientemente descubiertas y que durante mucho tiempo se creyeron perdidas incluso por los más ardientes admiradores de los hermanos Mars demuestran claramente el encanto que tenía la presencia de Harpo en la pantalla. Aunque interpretaba un papel secundario, Harpo fue capaz de inyectarle un poco de ese espíritu anárquico que más tarde caracterizaría a su personaje en la pantalla. ¿Seguro que no puedes moverte? Un diálogo muy poco brillante, pero destacable por ser la única vez en su carrera cinematográfica que Harpo hablaba ante la cámara. Por desgracia, las películas no estaban preparadas para su voz, tecnológicamente hablando. Broadway demandaba más locura Mars, y en diciembre de 1925 se estrenó su segundo gran éxito, Los Cuatro Cocos. Tuvieron la suerte de contar con un musical escrito por dos leyendas de Broadway, Josh S. Kaufman e Irving Berlin. En el reparto de esa farsa salvaje ambientada en Florida estaba Margaret Dumont, la dama que se convertiría en el complemento perenne de Groucho, interpretando a la persona mayor que se opone a sus travesuras infantiles. Años después, Groucho afirmaría que prácticamente era la quinta hermana Mars. Como en todas las obras de los hermanos Mars, uno nunca sabía qué esperar. Por ejemplo, una noche Harpo le pidió a una de las chicas del coro que corriese por el teatro en mitad de la escena de amor de Groucho con Dumont. Al público le encantó y la escena quedó. Después de Broadway se llevaron a los Cuatro Cocos de gira. La gira duraría hasta 1928, pero para cuando regresaron al Gran Camino Blanco para representar el conflicto de los Mars, su tercer éxito, el mundo del espectáculo estaba revolucionado.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am privileged to say a few words to you in this most modern and novel manner. Privileged because it's the first living Vitaphone announcement ever made announcing the coming of one of the year's outstanding pictures. What is the picture? Oh, well, of course.
Con el furor de las películas habladas, la Paramount, como todos los estudios, se desesperaba por contratar actores que pudiesen moverse y hablar al mismo tiempo. No dejaron escapar a los hermanos Mars.
And what's more remarkable to me is that 5 years after their success on Broadway, they made their first motion pictures. So they got 25 years on stage before you ever see them in Coconuts. And by that time, they were all 40 years old.
En la primavera de 1929, los hermanos Mars hacían la versión hablada de Los Cuatro Cocos durante el día y representaban el conflicto de los Mars en el teatro por la noche. Su carrera no podía ir mejor cuando les golpeó la tragedia. El 13 de septiembre de 1929, Minnie Mars moría después de sufrir un infarto.
All the boys were there. They were seated around a table. And I have never seen the Marx Brothers as a group that down. I mean, it was like there was a pall over the room. And I was, you know, I was 11 years old, and all I felt was the atmosphere. And I looked at them all, and I quickly got out. It was a terrible moment.
Alexander Woolcott escribió: había hecho mucho más que parir a sus hijos, criarlos y convertirlos en actores. Los inventó. Eran exactamente los cómicos que ella había imaginado para su propia diversión, y a nadie divirtieron más. Su recompensa era su cautivadora sonrisa. 6 semanas después del fallecimiento de Minnie se derrumbaba Wall Street. Se llevó lo que a los hermanos Mars, como a tantos otros, les había llevado tanto tiempo construir.
And I think the reason that he was so cautious or tight with his money is that he grew up poor. Then he made a lot of money in show business and then was wiped out in the crash, as many people were, and that terrified him.
He said, you know, George, I was playing golf. I came off the 18th hole, a rich man. When I got to the clubhouse, I was destitute.
And he never forgot it. Even though he went on to make the money over again, and probably more, he never felt secure about the financial situation. And he used to tell us that every night he went to bed, sure that he was going to wake up in the morning wiped out.
Los hermanos Mars necesitaban dinero, mucho dinero y rápido, y la mejor forma de conseguirlo era haciendo otra película.
I play now one of my own compositions by Victor Heuvel. Say, don't you see there are ladies present? What do you think this is? Put that hat down, will you? What do you do there? Get out of here.
This program is coming to you from the House of Davis.
El conflicto de los Mars fue todo un éxito, y como el cine era su futuro, solo podían ir a un lugar. Hollywood en los años 30 era una ciudad de sol, riqueza, diversión disparatada y moralidad resbaladiza. Fue este ambiente fresco el que recibió a los hermanos Mars cuando se bajaron del tren de Nueva York para hacer su primera película en Hollywood.
Monkey Business was done at Paramount. And it just so happens at the same time there was another movie being made there called $1 Million Legs. And there was a young lady by the name of Susan Fleming in that motion picture. And that's how Dad and Susan Fleming met. He very much wanted to ask her out on a date, and he had to summon all this courage up to ask her. And when he finally did at the end of the evening, she says, "Oh, I'd love to. You know, how shall I dress?" And Dad says, "Well, I'll wear black tie." So the evening of the date came, and she greeted him at her front door in this spectacular turquoise evening gown, and true to his word, he was in black tie. He was also wearing a big black bushy wig, sweatshirt, and ballet slippers. And without batting an eye, Susan said, "You know, you can always tell a New Yorker by the cut of his clothes."
El éxito de los hermanos Mars fue en parte debido a su química dentro y fuera de la pantalla.
The brothers would have normal sibling fights, just like any brothers, about various different things, but they would always come back because the bond was so strong that they would have this wonderful feeling of forgiveness.
There wasn't a day that went by that Daddy didn't call Groucho. They never said anything. I mean, he'd call, he'd say, "Hi, Grouch, what's new?" Grouch obviously would say nothing, and Daddy'd say, "Fine, bye." I mean, they did this every day they touched base.
Have you read any good books lately?
Plumas de Caballo, la cuarta película de los hermanos Mars, fue su cuarto éxito consecutivo. También los puso en la portada de la revista Time. Se podría decir que se adaptaron al éxito de Hollywood como el ganso a la sopa. El fascismo estaba en auge en Europa y Sopa de Ganso estaba llena de diálogos satíricos y dictadores grandilocuentes con su machismo belicista. Es probablemente una de sus películas más desenfrenadas y mirando hacia atrás la que hizo que se granjearan el cariño de la generación antibelicista de los años 60. Pero no fue el éxito de taquilla que la Paramount esperaba.
Just as laughs are the specialty of Harpo, Chico, and Groucho Marx. Seen Grauman in the famous forecourt of Grauman's Chinese Theater when the comedy clan gathered to be footprinted.
A pesar de su inmortalización en cemento en la entrada del Teatro Chino Grauman, la Paramount decidió no renovarles el contrato. Por si eso no fuese suficiente, Cepo, harto de papeles juveniles que no le permitían ser gracioso, dejó el grupo para convertirse en un importante representante de Hollywood. Una vez más, parecía que la carrera de los Mars había llegado a su fin. En 1932 llega el boom de la radio comercial. Con la cada vez más profunda depresión, el público necesitaba reírse desesperadamente. Las estrellas de la comedia eran atraídas al nuevo medio con la promesa de ganar mucho dinero.
Law office is a flywheel chassis
look just like a couple of stowaways we're looking for. Well, we just heard the opposite. We heard of the stowaways who look just like us. One is a little fella with an Italian accent.
Well, it can't be me. No one ever said Flywheel was a little fella with an Italian accent. Much mistake.
Las críticas eran de todo tipo, los índices de audiencia bajos, y el programa duró solo 26 semanas. Habría muchos otros fracasos radiofónicos, y para finales de los años 30, Groucho y Chico eran radio veneno. Lo que muy pocos saben es que en 1934 Harpo se convirtió en el primer artista norteamericano que trabajaba en Rusia después de la Revolución. Combatió el terrible invierno y la estricta seguridad gubernamental para mostrar al circuito del caviar el verdadero significado del marxismo. En estas desconocidas secuencias tomadas por un cámara ruso, Harpo toca directamente para un público que obviamente sabía apreciar. Cuando finalizó la gira de buena voluntad, el embajador de los Estados Unidos en Moscú alistó a Harpo como correo diplomático. Él nunca supo qué secretos había en el sobre adherido a su pierna, pero en aquellos días en que amenazaban las nubes de tormenta de la guerra, él estaba dispuesto a arriesgar la vida para ayudar a su país. Aquellos mismos nubarrones se cernían sobre la carrera de los hermanos Marx, es decir, hasta que la afición al juego de Chico sirvió para algo positivo.
Chico was a bridge partner with Irving Thalberg, and Chico said, you know, I don't think we're finished, and Irving said, you're not. He said, you've been handled wrong.
Chico habló con Thalberg, el espabilado jefe de producción de la Metro, quien le ofreció a los hermanos un trato increíble.
Chico came to his brothers and said, Thalberg's giving us a great contract. And Harpo and Groucho said, we're not signing any contract. And Chico said, what do you mean? He said, we're not signing unless you let us manage your money. And so Chico had to give in.
Pero el dinero no era el factor clave en ese trato. El ojo de Thalberg estaba puesto en la calidad creativa. Lo primero que hizo fue reunirlos de nuevo con el dramaturgo George C. Kaufman.
He said, I'm going to start a whole unit at MGM just for you, with your own writers and your own director. He said, and you'll wait and see. And of course, he was quite right.
I've been sitting right here since 7 o'clock.
Yes, with your back to me. When I invite a woman to dinner, I expect her to look at my face. That's the price she has to pay. You check, sir. $9.40. This is an outrage. If I were you, I wouldn't pay it. Stewart? Ah, come right ahead. Hey, do it. The food. Been waiting all that?
Food.
You, Stewart.
Come on.
You're fired. Do you understand? You're fired. Hey, you big bully. What's the idea of hitting that little bully? Will you kindly let me handle my own affairs? Get out. Now, what do you got to say to me? Just this. Can you sleep on your stomach with such big buttons on your pajamas? Why, you...
Antes de que las cámaras pudiesen recoger un fotograma de la película, los hermanos Marx comenzaron a preocuparse por el guión, así que Thalberg sugirió hacer una gira para probar las escenas seleccionadas. Esta decisión no solo mejoró el guión, sino que devolvió la confianza a los hermanos al desarrollar lo que mejor sabían hacer, trabajar en directo ante el público.
I used to see Groucho and the brothers on the stage of the Golden Gate Theater in San Francisco. They would come up and do scenes from their upcoming movie that they hadn't shot yet.
I have never laughed like that in my life in the theater. Not ever. I mean, I saw 4 shows a day, 7 days a week, and I screamed laughing all the time.
They would do them in front of this live audience at the Golden Gate Theater and time the laughs so that when they shot the movie, they would leave that much space for the audience to laugh at the movie so you could hear the next joke.
As funny as they were in film, they were 100 times, 1,000 times funnier on stage. And they were unpredictable. I mean, things would happen on stage that was so wonderful.
And I used to watch them wallpaper Margaret Dumont into the wall, 4 or 5 shows a day, this poor woman who looked like my mother.
Durante la gira casi se suprime la famosa escena del camarote porque no provocaba ninguna risa. Entonces, una noche se olvidaron del guión y la anarquía marxista imperó en el escenario una vez más. Los resultados transformaron una escena floja en una clásica del cine.
On the second or third day, I thought to myself, gee, the second show, there's nobody in the audience except a few drunks, guys in overcoats, and a few ladies of the evening. I'll go and get my hair done. So I went out and came back and went backstage, and Daddy and Harpo were waiting for me. And I said, hi, and they said, well? And I said, well? And they said, well? And I really didn't know what the hell they were talking about. I looked at Daddy and looked at Harpo, and Harpo said, I told you she wouldn't know. Chico said, I was sure you'd guess. I said, no, what? Guess what? And it turned out they had changed parts. Daddy had played Harpo, and Harpo had played Daddy, and they did it for me, and I wasn't there. That's one of the biggest disappointments I've ever had in show business. It was a heartbreak, because they never would do it again.
La gira fue todo un éxito, y la fe de Thalberg en los hermanos Marx se vio ratificada. Una noche en la ópera fue un éxito de taquilla, y volvió a convertirlos en grandes estrellas una vez más. Intentando repetir la fórmula que tan buen resultado les había dado con Una noche en la ópera, los hermanos Marx volvieron a coger la carretera para probar un nuevo guión, pero 2 semanas después de que comenzara el rodaje, Thalberg, de 37 años, moría de una neumonía. Sin su consejo durante el rodaje y la edición, los hermanos no tenían una visión creativa fuerte. Aún así, Thalberg había iniciado el camino, y un día en las carreras resultó ser la última gran película de los hermanos Marx.
Either he's dead or my watch is stopped. Closer, I'll be in back of it. I got a message from the man on the moon for you. Just you. And the blue bunnies in the waters together. Heidi, Heidi, Heidi.
Un día en las carreras aumentó la fama de los hermanos Marx, y como muchas otras estrellas del cine de los años 30, empezaron a aparecer en los lugares más sorprendentes.
Now listen, babe. I've been bad a few words, see? I've been chasing you all night. Now, how about a little kiss, baby? Well, fancy meeting you here.
Roses are red. Violets are blue. He'll have the sin. And nuts to you.
No! Objection overruled.
You are guilty.
Give him a fair trial, and then we'll shoot him.
Los hermanos Marx eran queridos en todas partes menos en la Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, donde sin Thalberg su carrera se estancó. Así que recurrieron a la RKO para hacer su siguiente película, la única que no había sido escrita especialmente para ellos. Fue un producto torpe.
can't do this to me. If I lose my cast, I'll sue him. If I lose my backer, I'll kill him.
Después del estrepitoso fracaso de El Hotel de los Líos, los hermanos Marx regresaron a la Metro, que en 1931 había estrenado películas ganadoras de Oscar como Lo que el viento se llevó y El mago de Oz. Pero a Louis B. Mayer no le gustaban los hermanos Marx, y sin un ejecutivo de apoyo que supervisara su trabajo, el interés de los Marx por hacer cine disminuyó y se volvieron rebeldes en el plató.
The writers who worked on Marx Brothers films all had one thing in common: exhaustion. They were not the easiest people for a director to contain.
Of course, Groucho, as he said to me, you know, while my brothers were out chasing girls during the making of these movies, I'm in my dressing room memorizing the lines.
Groucho would go in his dressing room, smoke a cigar, study the script, and be there, ready to go to work, and grump a lot. Harpo would be horsing around a little bit, but Chico would be off someplace. He might even be off the stage or in a phone booth someplace, phoning in some bets.
They had a bet that whoever was late was fined. And even Harpo was late once in a great while. And so Harpo and Daddy looked at each other and they said, Groucho is never late. So they went, when he was home, they went to his garage and they fixed it so he couldn't get his car out in the morning. He had to take a cab to the studio. And he came there, he was boiling mad.
Nobody can outshoot two-gun Quail. Boys, sweep him out of the gutter. It's just like a movie.
Just a moment. I have a most important announcement to make. Most important. The Marx Brothers are retiring from the silver screen.
We didn't know you cared. But since you do, we'll present to you songs and scenes from our first farewell picture, The Big Star, where everything's a goodbye. Goodbye.
Groucho, Chico y Harpo estaban ahora en los 50. Sus tres últimas películas fueron mediocres y la Metro ya no los quería. En realidad tampoco los quería ningún otro estudio de la ciudad. Los hermanos, aparte de Chico, no tenían necesidad económica de trabajar, así que decidieron retirarse.
That's the fine. Let there be wine. And women. And the song. And women. And caviar. And women.
La función había terminado. Nada volvería a ser lo mismo ni para los hermanos Marx ni para los Estados Unidos.
Pearl Harbor.
The brunt of the cowardly blow struck at Pearl Harbor was borne by the Army and Navy.
Harpo contribuyó al esfuerzo bélico recorriendo el país vendiendo bonos de guerra con estrellas como Lucille Ball y Fred Astaire. Chico formó una orquesta e hizo una gira nacional.
Chico Marx, his piano and his orchestra. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Here we are backstage at the Stanley again, and this is yours truly, Ray Spencer, bringing to you for the first time on the air the music of Chico Marx and his new outstanding orchestra.
He would be leading the band, and then he would get tired, and his hand sort of would droop, and he would turn his back on the band and sit down and take out a banana and peel it and start to eat the banana. And every so often he would, over his back, he would give a beat to the band. Probably didn't do anything to the musicians, but it was very charming.
Groucho había cimentado su carrera sobre el amor al lenguaje. ¿Dónde más podía encontrar la salvación sino volviendo a la radio?
Come on down to the ribbon town, where you'll drown your day.
citizen of Blue Ribbon Town, our happy host of hilarious hijinks, Groucho Marx.
Oh, boy, what a turnout. Isn't this wonderful, Groucho?
Wonderful. What's wonderful about it? Where are all the girls?
Girls? Did you expect to see girls at a Marine camp?
Of course. Where's Maureen O'Sullivan and Maureen O'Hara and Maureen Dietrich?
So we're walking down, and on the 11th floor, there was a sign on the door that said, Hamburger and Hamburger Attorneys at Law. Now, this was too good for Groucho to pass up. So he walks in, I followed him in, and he says, I want to say a hamburger. And he always finds the perfect foil seated behind a desk. The lady said, which hamburger did you want to see? And Groucho says, I've always found that one hamburger is pretty much like another hamburger. And she says, well, I really must know which one. He says, the oldest hamburger. She says, oh, Hamburger Sr. died last week. He says, really? Well, I'm Groucho Marx. Dig him up.
Como maestro de ceremonias tradicional, Groucho sonaba acartonado e incómodo y la audiencia disminuyó. El programa fue suspendido y los productores radiofónicos decidieron que Groucho no volviera a tener un programa permanente en antena. Con su carrera congelada, Groucho, como Harpo, volvió su atención hacia tareas más patrióticas.
I think I enjoyed Groucho the most when we did the Victory Caravan back in 1942 when we were selling bonds across the country in about 25, 26 cities. And it was amazing. The train stopped in Washington, which was our first stop, and they had a tremendous crowd cheering everybody that got off the train. And when Groucho got off, nobody recognized him because he didn't have his mustache or cigar. So he just climbed down the other end of the car, put on his mustache, put the cigar in his mouth, got down on the crotch, got off, and got a tremendous hand.
And it turned out that in these 30 days of the tour, they sold more war bonds than any other single event ever put on by anybody.
La bomba atómica finalizó la guerra e hizo que las tropas regresaran a casa. El otoño de 1945 era el momento de que todos los estadounidenses volvieran a la vida normal. Había familias que reunir, vidas que reconstruir, pero ¿podrían los hermanos Marx encontrar un lugar en este mundo feliz?
You bet your life.
Oh, where have you been? I just announced you wanted you to... You've been backstage? Backstage. Nice. Can you get me one, too?
And we've got an added starter, Chico Marx. Hey, let an athlete in.
You manipulate the uncle, and I'll distract the girl. Tell him Groucho sent you.